Dear listeners, please note that due to unforeseeable circumstances in the recording process, there are some unavoidable background noises in this episode. The Granules of Grief with Refiloe team sends out apologies for this, but guarantees that it does not, however, take away from the overall audibility of the interview. Thank you for your understanding and support. Please note that this episode will also feature descriptions of violence and police brutality that some may find disturbing. Thank you.
This is Granules of Grief with Refiloe, a podcast breaking down into digestible pieces the big lump that is grief. For those still struggling with its enormity, those unfamiliar, and even those who found a version of living that is somewhat closer to the aliveness they had before the loss. Thank you for being here. I have on the show today Lindsay Myeni. Lindsay, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all the listeners of Granules of Grief with Refiloe, new listeners, returning listeners. Thank you so much for making time. I don't know how to introduce this because it is one I think was orchestrated really by forces way beyond just you, me, and the friend who introduced us. It really was. So I just want to say thank you, Lindsay, for honoring the invitation. I appreciate getting to know you. Your story, of course, didn't just touch me even before I met you. I mean, it touched the world. I don't know. I wish I could just reach in and hug you. Please go ahead and tell listeners about yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm Lindsay. Thank you, Refiloe. You've been a gem, and this show is a gem. It's completely impactful. You're just singing your song, and I think birds are meant to sing their song, and it comes naturally, and you have to do this. It's an assignment. I feel like God assigns us certain purposes, and we start to sense what those things are. Every now and then we get pulled towards something, and you even said, I don't even know why I do this, but you just do it. You're singing your song. You have to. So I just commend you for singing your song.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. To get into it, my husband was murdered on April 14th, 2021. That's even sad to say out loud. Like, it's been 2 years, but these things, they hit you in grief waves, I'd say. Waves and waves. And in the beginning, I'd have maybe a grief wave every few days, every day, and then eventually every week. And now I'm at a point where I have usually a grief day every month or so, which I've heard the first year you're just in shock pretty much. And you think you're getting through it and you're like, I'm doing so good. I'm getting my hair done, my nails done. I'm going to work. I'm raising my kids. I'm doing this thing. I'm surviving. I'm somehow still alive, regardless of how badly I want to be with my person who is dead. And I just finished year 2. They say is the hardest. I've spoken to hundreds of widows. They say because the numbness is gone, the shock is gone. People stop calling. People stop checking in on you. They just assume you're okay now. And you've already seen who your real friends are and aren't, and lost a lot of people from that already. So then year 3, I've heard, is the most healing year. Also hard, but just by year 3, you're actually starting to feel like you want to do things again, and you want to surf when you used to surf, and you want to hike because you used to hike. So that's where I'm at. I'm just entering year 3 this month. We just did a little lantern lighting ceremony thing for Lindani on the 14th because it's April now.
Of course. Thank you for doing this month. And I asked you to tell us who you are. And I don't think it was conscious, but what you told us was, I'm just this girl who lost the love of her life and whose life since that moment has revolved around the fact that Lindani is gone. And I think that's very significant for anyone who's listening and who doesn't understand grief. What you've said, without saying it, you've said, from that moment, my life has been split into moments of, am I coping with the fact that Lindani is gone? Am I not coping? Thank you so much for sharing that. I want you to tell us a little bit now about who you are.
Oh, yes. Okay, so I am European American from Hawaii. I'm 31 years old. I'm a real estate agent. I grew up on Honolulu, Hawaii. It's the most isolated island on Earth, but it doesn't feel that way. There's like 1 million people on one island. And so I grew up with a bunch of Asian people and Islander people, and I didn't really know that I was European because you just are who everyone else around you is. And you don't stare in the mirror as a child. You decide you're welcome and accepted. And you just live life that way. It wasn't until I was much older that people keep saying you're white and they keep saying you're American. And I never really identified with either of those things. I mean, every year we had to take hula and Hawaiian lessons, and we had to learn world languages. And I think a lot of those things kind of built me into who I am today. And I was raised by a single father and my older brother, Justin. He's 2 years older. So I only grew up around men. Respect was my dad is so laid back and mellow, but also a very respectful, kind person. I think all those things that made me who I am lined up with when I met Lindani, who he already was. It's like his whole life had led him up to me, and my whole life had led him up to meet him.
I love that, Lindsay. So 2 things you've said jumped out at me. Seeing how you live your life, one thing that did strike me was life that when someone has been exposed to different cultures, it is a gift. It is evident that you must have had very early exposure to the fact that there's more than just one way of being in the world. And it is just beautiful to watch. You've already touched on the fact that losing your husband was by far your most significant encounter with grief. Please tell me and the listeners now about Lindani. Who was Lindani? How was he?
Lindani was very charismatic. He was sexy, man. Okay, people are like, he is so hot. I'm like, I know. So charismatic and just got an allure to him. He was just a bold person who really said what was on his mind, but he didn't talk that often. So it's like, if you're in a group full of people talking, he would just throw out those nuggets there and get you cracking up laughing. Like, he had a way of bringing people into the moment.
Uh-huh.
And I think so often we live in some type of depression of the past and what happened, or anxiety over the future, what might happen. And then Lindani had a way of just bringing you to now, this very moment. We're here, and it's so fun. Like, he just always made fun, had fun, laughed. He'd just throw his head back laughing, and he would just make jokes about things that I don't know. It's so hard to capture who he was in a picture or in words. But in his videos, you can really feel like, oh my gosh, he's always dancing, singing, walking barefoot, taking the trash can from the outside road in. Just like, I don't know. He had this walk. I would be like, it's like you're a dog wagging your tail. Like, whenever you have land or a yard to take care of, you're like, yep, doing my thing. Such a man in the most non-threat way, a man in the most, people like to say gentle giant, but I mean, he's like 6'3", so he's tall. And I speak of him in present tense, even though he's passed. And that's pretty common with people who grieve. But for people who haven't grieved, you're like, are you okay in the head? But it's like, still alive to me in a way. His body is gone, but I still feel connected to his spirit somehow. And I feel like he still watches over me and the kids. And yeah.
Oh, wonderful. I know exactly what you mean. It is so difficult to sum up a human being to people who never experienced him. I don't know what it is that I read or what it is that I saw that said to me, because I was following everything as it was happening. And I think one thing I got was that you felt very safe with Linda.
Definitely. I was actually having a grief wave this morning and crying in the car, ironically, on this day. And I had the realization, I'm grieving my protector. You know, every time I have a grief wave, I pretty much have an answer at the end of the day. What was I grieving today? Oh, it's him as my children's father. It's him as the one who helped me make decisions. Like, when you run into a stumbling block without that person, you start to realize, oh, I can't protect myself the way he could protect me. I'm mourning that today. Just waking up from nightmares the past couple nights, and when you hear the loud noise at night and you need to go check, but your man used to check, and now you're alone with the kids and you don't feel safe. When you have those moments, it just takes you back to the reality, which I think grief waves, the body doesn't lie. It tells you when you need to grieve. You can keep trying to avoid it. So I usually avoid it until I drop the kids off at school or till they're gone, but sometimes even if they're there, a grief wave's got to come when it's got to come. He's so irreplaceable, it's not even funny. The prospect of love even sounds daunting, because the idea of even loving someone again in future, you didn't just take someone's father away and their husband and their best friend and their confidant, but you took someone's love life, their entire love life. Like, I still feel so loyal to him, and I feel like he had such big shoes to fill. I feel like I married a unicorn. Or does lightning strike twice?
Yeah,
and I find it does. According to the other widows I speak to, it does occasionally. Often you find that they really found love again. But for me, I just still very much feel like, wow, I am so lucky. If he only had 5 years left on earth and God knew he was going to go at that time, and even though I didn't know, I cannot feel sorry for myself. I cannot play a victim role my whole life. I can't feel sorry for myself. I need to keep it moving for me and the kids. And I need to remember that I'm lucky. I'm the lucky one. I'm so lucky he chose me to be his wife.
Oh, thank you so much, Lindsay. That is so beautifully put. And you packed so much into that, just so profound, that I'm now chasing these points and trying to also rein myself in. I think you just gave a grief crash course. So helpful for even the people who don't know what grief looks like. You're missing the physical person. And because you're the first widow I've actually talked to on this show, you're bringing in a very unique element. There's your children's father. You're responsible for these people. Do you cry in front of them? Do you not cry in front of them? And I think it's a good thing that you're saying when the wave comes, you let them see the tears. At least that was my approach, because I don't want my kids to think the way I was raised, that you lose someone and then you just go on. It resonates with me. I'd put the kids on the bus and then I come back and howl. And I'm sure my neighbors thought lots of things about me in those howling episodes. So I'm serious, howling like, whoa!
This morning, I have to real. The car ride from school, the neighbors are like, what is going on outside? Oh my God. Gotta get that out. You can't keep that in.
You cannot. Oh, you are the first person to validate my howling.
Yes, howl. If you have to pee, you have to pee. If you howl, you have to howl.
I'm so sorry. I love it because I have this experience where my neighbor and now friend had found me walking from the shops in a howling episode and he hadn't known what to do. It was so weird. So this resonates with me, and it brings in the lens of the grieving widow, also how chaotic and how up and down grief is. You're right. I hope it gives someone else clarity and makes someone else feel less alone. Because I think that's what you also just did for me now. And so thank you so much. I want to get into the actual time around which Lindani was murdered.
Oh, just to go back on crying in front of your kids. I actually think it's a great idea to cry in front of your kids occasionally. But there's definitely a line between leaning on your kids emotionally and having them be your emotional support system, which I think is unhealthy. And you see that sometimes a woman will lose her husband and she'll make her son into her husband. She'll give him all the responsibilities and the emotional baggage of being a husband. So I would say there's definitely a line with that. The far other end of the spectrum is never crying in front of your kids. And really, I have a close friend who lost his dad, and he said, my mom didn't cry in front of us once. She never let us know who she really was. And it wasn't authentic. And it made us feel like we're alone, because now we're just crying ourselves, thinking there's something wrong with us. Well, she's not crying at all. But really, she was just doing it in secret. So I think in reality, everyone does cry, but people don't post about it on social media or WhatsApp or Facebook or anything. I think it's healthy to be open about the fact that we all do have those crying days. And other people howl, and you felt like other people didn't even howl. That's how quiet we are about sadness. We don't want to show people we're sad. And I think that's a normal thing in our society.
There has to be a balance, and you put it beautifully. That angle you brought in around, don't turn your kids into a crutch. Back to Lindani. Lindsay, please tell us about the days leading up to that day that you could not have dreamt would come.
I think that's the hardest part to talk about. Let me just talk about that season. So we had gone from living in South Africa together. That was our thing. We always lived here. in South Africa together. That was our world. Moving back to America, to Denver for a year in the height of COVID-19 with a toddler, and I was pregnant with 90. And he couldn't work because here he had to wait for his green card paperwork. So him seeing me have to be a provider while pregnant broke his heart. Him to not work as an African man who loves to work and make sure he provides for his family. I'm pretty sure COVID was the lockdowns and everything were really hard for everyone. So that was all of 2020. Then January 2021, we moved with a newborn Nandi. She was 1 month old at the time, almost 2 months. We moved to Hawaii, where I'm from. So this is my first time with him living on my home island in my home state. I mean, he'd visited before, but this is the first time, wow, we're living in my field and I can go for real estate full-time in person. Like I can go for my career and live by my friends and family, which had not been the case the past 5 years prior. So it was really a special time for us. Also, Hawaii's freaking expensive. So it's also, the pressure was on too. His green card still isn't here. The day he was killed, his green card appointment was the next week, Friday. So he never did get his green card, which was heartbreaking because we waited like almost a year and a half for that thing. And he had just got his work permit 2 weeks prior. 9 days before, he found out his father was his uncle and his uncle was his father. So instead of his father being the cop or detective who didn't raise him and didn't claim him, his real father on his birth certificate was the king, which is his brother. So just finding out that you're actually a prince, just finding out that your mom lied to you your whole life, even though she's your favorite person, and she's passed, so you couldn't talk to her about it. And finding all that out, we were going to go to visit South Africa in June. His grandma was sick. We couldn't wait to get back there, and he wanted to just rely on himself and take care of Gogo. And he wanted to address the king thing. So a lot of things happening. I'm doing real estate. He's watching both kids whenever I need to meet with clients. I'm taking Nandi on some showings on my back in a boleta, in a baby carrier. We had gotten to such a honest point with each other where we just did not care what each other thought, in a good way, in a healthy way of like, I'm just going to tell you what I'm really feeling, and just seeing each other for who we actually are in that moment. And letting go of, I don't think only that last year, I really let go of, oh, this is my husband who she should be, and this is who I am and who I should be. And let it go, and I just was who I was, and he was who he was. And it felt so good and natural and free. And we could be really honest. For him, he hadn't been home in over a year. That was like torture for him. Like, I'm used to being embraced by everyone I walk across. And really, we couldn't walk through the mall in South Africa without 5-6 people who know him stopping him. Lindani, or didn't I see you on Idol, or this? He was just a leader in the community. He was the scouts leader of over like 300 kids. So if you ever ran into any of those kids and their parents, they're like, CD, camp director, it's me. He sang on South African Idols. He got top 25. He played rugby. He played pro at one point. And so he was well known in the community and in this area. And he just had a lot of friends.
Wow.
And he made everyone feel like they were his best friends. So when he passed, everyone's like coming forward as his best friend. They're really very lovable. Even my family in Hawaii loved him. All the aunties, like, yeah, and my cousins. And it's like, I was home in Hawaii. I lived in the township for 3 years, and I felt welcome and protected and loved. He lived at my home for 3 months in Hawaii and was... I just wanted to take you into the world of where we were first. Everything's happening with the king thing. And so he was just trying to study all the king things. So basically that day on the 14th of April, he's overwhelmed with everything going on, but he's also excited because he's finally going to get to go home because and the work permit finally. So we're happy. And the green card appointment's next week. It's like we're at the climax of the movie of our life and of our lives. And then I wanted to surprise him by getting him out of the house and show him the island. Like, I have never taken him around the whole island. Let me just take him all the way up to North Shore. Like, our island is only 1 hour north by 1 hour south. But we made stops along the whole island. And I took him to culturally significant places and royalty significant places. Because it's also, Hawaii is a kingdom with kings and queens, similar to here. I just took him up the whole island. I remember the order and I remember a lot of details, but I can't fit it all in one podcast.
Yeah.
One point, we pull over by the ocean and park right next to the ocean, leave the kids in the car for a minute, windows down. And then we, with my shoes on, we went in the ocean and we just prayed. And he came up behind me and hugged me. And that was the best hug. And I think it might have been the last hug. That was the best hug I've ever had. And I threw some coins in the ocean for our ancestors, which is just to thank the people who came before us. That's a Zulu thing to do that a lot of people might not understand. But yeah, so I went and I threw the coins in, and he just came up behind me and hugged me, and he was like, "Thank you for understanding me." And I was like, oh, that moment just means so much to me. Like, that whole moment was just beautiful. So we get back in the car and we drive down. I'm like, look, babe, this is a little shack that sells like wooden handcrafted things. So I found this wooden hook, and he asked the Tongan guy, what does this hook represent? And he had just been telling me, Lindsay, I feel like I need spiritual protection. Something's not right today. Something's not right. And I just feel like somehow people know when they're going to be killed, or they know when they're going to die. He said, I feel like I need spiritual protection. And like that hook thing so then we got to that wooden crafted place, and the Tongan guy, he said, what does this hook represent? And he said, it represents strength and protection. So he was like, babe, we got to get this. And then when he said it was $250, I was like, yo, no, we're out. I just couldn't get past $250. We go to the bottom of the island. He's looking for the book, Cry My Beloved Country. He wanted to read it. He was saying, I haven't even read this book yet, and it's on my country. We went all the way back to freaking Waikiki and went to look for this book, and they don't have it there. And Sizwe tries to like throw a ball on the ground that he finds it's an ornament. It shatters. We buy a magnet that says Shaka, which to Lindani, Shaka Zulu, which to Hawaii is like that symbol of Shaka with your hand. Then we go back up to our house. We've been in the sun the whole day, but also it was such a good day, such a loving day. And everyone's hungry. I need to feed our little family of 4 ASAP, get the babies ready for bed. He says, babe, I just need to go on a drive. And I'm like, it's okay. He said, should I take in Sizwe? And I said, we just were like, I was like, no, just leave him. And because he needs to get ready for bed anyway. He kisses me in the kitchen, and I'm preparing his food. And then I never saw him again. That was the last time I ever kissed him.
You want to take a break? Okay.
No, I'm okay.
Thank you so much for sharing that. There's so much in that. I hope you can understand what I mean when I say I'm so happy for you. That is the kind of last day you had with Lindani. Very happy for you because you were human, and anyone very happy for you because a lot of people will then struggle after because we're human, and anyone who's married knows that day could have gone anyway. You know what I mean? That day could have been the day when you guys were having a love. I mean, everyone who's married and who's in a new marriage, and with all these transitions that you've talked about. I'm an immigrant in the US. I know what it feels like to come here and to be so overwhelmed and to walk around and nobody knows you. Even just coming from a small town, even just the distances between places are overwhelming. What, you're asking me to come to a party an hour away? If I was in Lesotho, an hour away would be halfway across the country. And I get it. I just want to say everything resonates. And for me, the headspace he was in, I get it completely. And I get the challenge you as a woman faced. Not just any woman, a woman whose country this is, and a woman who brought the love of her life here. I'm not even going to talk more about that. I think anyone who's listening can understand exactly how these nuances must have then contributed to your grief journey. And I'm sorry. The only thing that I can say is that I am so sorry.
Thank you.
There's a lot of spirituality between you and Lindani. I can feel who he was. And I thank you for doing that. I hope you don't mind me saying, I really hope lightning strikes twice, because this was an awesome guy. I must tell you.
Yo, he was. And I pray if ever I find love again, that I'll sense it's Lindani has sent me this person. There will be some things that line up that I'm like, oh yeah, for sure.
I feel you. And I don't doubt that there will be, because I feel like how we grieve people is very representative of who they were. And it sounds like he was very spiritual.
And he loved God, his people. Like, he was such a good man, an incredible man.
You've already said a lot, and I just want to bring us, if you can, and if not, that's absolutely fine. We move on. Do you want to tell me about that earth? I don't even know what it must have been like, because Lindani had just walked out the door.
What transpired after, this is also a very painful part to talk about. He was murdered 7 blocks from where our house was. And I asked myself, like, I didn't hear the gunshots. And I look back at my videos now and I'm like, wow, I was watching Survivor, taking a selfie with Zizwa. So my knowledge of anything happening was nothing until the next morning. I just prayed and went to bed. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I just felt like God's like, just go to sleep. Woke up and I was like, dang, Nandi, you look just like your dad. And I remember saying that and looking at her, because some days you see your baby grow, like, significantly. And that was one of those mornings. I woke up and like, you look just like your dad. So I remember I even took a picture of her. He still wasn't home. I looked at my messages and I was starting to freak out. Like, where is he? What's going on? I'm thinking, okay, he had to message me, call me. Where is he? What's going on? And I see a message from a former colleague from a long time ago who's now a cop. And she was like, please tell me that's not your husband's name. I just saw on the docket. And I was like, docket for what? Like, is he in trouble? What's going on? And she's like, I hope he's not involved in the shooting last night. I was like, shooting? He doesn't even have a gun. Like, what are you talking about? So then I start calling all the hospitals. I tell my mom. I wake up my friend Ashley, who had been staying with us for a month. And I'm like, things are not okay. Get up and help me. And I'm sure that traumatized her now, because literally, like, who wants to be woken up to, like, this freaking out? Me, I'm like, hey. Not the way my friends were there for me after, I cannot even tell you. I cannot even thank them enough. That would be 5 podcasts. So I get to Ashley and I'm like, something's really wrong. I think he's not okay and I need to find him. Like, help me find him. And I just need to know, like, if he was shot or something. Like, maybe he's in a hospital. I just need to get to him and hold his hand. And so we called our other Ashley friend. And I'm like, please stay with the kids. I just need to find him. And other Ashley leaves work. She's a manager at a hotel. She just booked it and came to my house. I jumped in the car and I'm like, things are not okay. Like, help me find him, everything. My mom is calling all the hospitals. They all say he's not there. She even called the prison because he said docket. So we're like, what's that? What docket? What is she talking about? The old colleague couldn't say anything, but I just sat outside Queen Emma Hospital. It's the nearest, biggest hospital. I'm asking the lady at the front door, like, please, his name's Lindsay Myeni. He's tall. He's a tall black guy. There's not a lot of black guys here. Please help me find him. And she said, he hasn't been here. Even though later I found he was pronounced dead there. I still don't understand that. But then I'm sitting under a tree and she's, Lindsay, okay, an investigator just called me. He said he's on the way. And I'm like, Ashley, why would he be on the way if he's not dead? Why is he coming here? Why can't he say it over the phone? And yay. And I said, Ashley, something's wrong. Something's really messed up. Please just take a video of him. And she videoed the whole thing he just said to me. And the guy didn't give a F. It was so nonchalant. I still have that video. I'll never watch it back, but he just didn't give an F. He's like, so was your husband trained anything? Because he's really strong, you know. Was he military trained? I'm like, no, he played rugby. And he's like, so did he have any former, like, professional fighting skills? I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? He said, so there's an altercation with the police and your husband's been shot. He's dead now. That is pretty much all he gave me. And then that's the only interaction I ever had with the cops to this day. 2 years ago, they told me he was murdered. They never sent condolences.
Lindsay, I don't know what to say. I really don't. Some people come on the show and they talk about insensitivity, you know? I've never experienced this level of insensitivity. Never mind the fact that this should have never happened. Then the next thing on TV, the chief of police is congratulating his officers for a job well done. Oh my God. Like, they're not releasing the video footage at this point. We've got nothing to go off of. But obviously, I know my husband. You cannot tell me. And then we look at the time of death.
I forgot to tell you, after he went on his drive, there's one point where I call him. I could hear the wind and I could hear the car door ding, 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 ding. Like, when you have the keys in the door. And I never forgot that. And I journaled it that next day because I was trying to put together all the pieces. And that was when he had arrived at that house. So within 18 minutes of that phone call, he had 4 bullets in him. And I asked myself, like, how can you tell me something about my husband after 18 minutes of knowing him? And then to find out, no, these cops only knew him for less than 1 minute before murdering him. Less than 1 minute. You could not find another way to talk to my husband without understanding him. You approach him in the dark with a flashlight. So it turns out he went to this house down. It's not even a house, it's a B&B. So it's technically a place of business, I guess. It's 7 blocks from my house on the way home. So obviously when he said he was on his way, he was just making one last stop. I don't know why. But later when I drove down that street, I realized that corner on that house, on that corner, the white house on the corner, he had been saying, I love the way this house is built. And oftentimes if he liked the way someone did their porch or deck or whatever, he would just knock on the door and ask them, who made Wada Wada? Who made Wada Wada? And then he would figure out how to do it to his house in South Africa. Okay, so he always said that about the house on the corner. So the time that I finally had the guts to drive down that street, I first noticed the King Kamehameha sign on that corner of that street on Koho and Aleva Drive. We live on Aleva Drive, and his murder was on Koho, and they're intersecting streets. So 7 blocks away, there's a King Kamehameha sign in some areas in Hawaii signifying either royal people used to live here. This is a royal landmark. As soon as I drove down that street again, I realized, hello, this is the end of his journey. His last journey, of course, he stopped to see the house that he'd always talked about, or he turned because it's a King Kamehameha sign flashing right here. And I told him that's a royal house. So anyway, for whatever reason, then when I wanted to turn where the King Kamehameha sign was and park my car, I realized there's no parking. The first place to park is the next house, which is the one he was murdered at. Anyway, so it's a mansion. There's like 7 or 8 cars in the driveway. So it's not like someone's house. And there was, what's her name? Sabina Wang and her husband, who are Chinese immigrants who live in New Jersey now. And they were staying at that B&B. It's an illegal B&B. They were staying there for a month, I think. So they're also not local. Now you're dealing with 2 immigrants, one with a British accent from South Africa, African, and one Chinese accent from China. Okay, now they're talking wada wada wada. They still haven't even given me a clear transcript of all what was said, but he took his shoes off at the door. And I don't know if he was looking for the temple next door, because there's also a temple next door. I don't know if it was the King Kamehameha sign, the house that he liked on the corner, or the temple next door that drew him to that house. But it's almost like it led him right to his death, because that lady called the cops.
I remember that.
And as soon as they came, she said, that's them. And for him, he could definitely not see their cops. It's dark outside at this point. You've got a military-grade flashlight in his eyes, and you're pointing a gun, which you can see the shadow of on the ground. So they've kind of redone all the lighting and stuff, my lawyers and whatnot. So he couldn't see that there were cops. So when they kept saying, get down on the ground, he took the gun out of the hand of the guy. He hit the guy who had the gun, which he had always told me he would do if ever he was hijacked. I mean, he was already in his car at this point, and they called him out of his car to get on the ground. So if you're from South Africa and you hear get on the ground and you're outside a car, what does that mean? What does that mean to a South African? Doesn't mean it's a cop. Because he kept saying, who are you? That was a moment for you to say, I'm a cop. I'm a cop. I'm a police officer. That was this moment.
And it was never said, right, Lindsay? I think it was never said.
Nope, it wasn't. After they shot him, they said police, but he was already shot. So had they even said police, this whole story could have been different. Had they ever not blinded him with a military light, the whole story could have been different. Had they not turned off their sirens and come in the dark at night and their headlights to come around the corner, hide and sneak around the yard to come in the dark, they specifically sneak attacked him. I mean, this is not how I would have been treated, and I know it's not.
It's not.
And I know if it was me there that day, I'd be alive.
You'd be alive.
And I know many other people who do things that are way wilder and they end up alive.
And there's the
So going to the wrong house, saying sorry, putting back on your shoes, trying to put them on in the car and leave, to go back to your wife and kids where I literally have chicken waiting on the table for him. His dinner is literally getting cold. And then you murder him and don't even tell me that night or ever, the investigator tells me. And you never send condolences or care. You congratulate your officers for a job well done. Like, how much can you try to cover your asses at that point? Like, I just felt like the audacity and the things that happened after Refiloe, the things that happened after were so damaging. If I tell you what they did to his body that night and the next day without my consent, I just don't want people to lose faith in humanity. I don't even like sharing the awful things they did to my husband.
The lack of humanity you were shown. They stripped him completely of his humanity. When he was alive, they treated him without care for him, even when he had passed, even though we don't get into the details, and that's fine. And then they couldn't even redeem themselves and treat you and his children with dignity. And that is unforgivable. I'm pretty sorry. I watched the video, so I know all these things, and I understand that they didn't announce. And as a Mosotho who lived in South Africa, I know how edgy we are. And if we get into the issue of, the racial disparities, we don't nearly have enough time to go piece by piece. I have often felt like those people he was talking to, they could have also treated him differently. There's a lot that can be said. So I will just settle for I'm so sorry. And I hope that on your quest for justice, I don't even know what justice is. I hope that they show a speck of decency and understanding that this was a human being. I'm mad, I'm sad. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. It was like the mafia had killed my husband, and then now I was scared for me and the kids to even stay there. And every society, I was just thinking this today, I have seen almost too much of the world. I've been to 30 countries. I've lived in 4 continents. I've lived in 14 of those countries. I've seen that most people are good. At the same time, I've also seen every society has some type of underground world. And when the police and the underground world are the same thing, you have lost it in your country. And I'm sorry, but South Africa has lost some of that. America has lost some of that, a big portion of it. When you can't trust your cops, now your own security is breached. This is everything he stood for, that people get treated with respect and dignity. And and for my husband to become the George Floyd of Hawaii, wow, that's not something I saw coming. I forgot to add, when he got to that house, he introduced himself as Lindani and Myeni from South Africa. Took off his shoes, went in, and had a conversation with them, came out, said sorry.
I just want to go back and bring the focus back to you, Lindsay. I don't even know. As you're talking, the unanswered questions are just flashing at me. Was it his reconciling with his royal thing that led him there, where he thought it was royal? What was it? And one thing I'm identifying here is that it's one of those instances where all the wrong things happened, leading to the absolutely wrong and catastrophic ending. I'm deeply, deeply sorry. And one day when we meet, I will give you the mother of all hugs.
Oh, I can't wait for the hug. I love hugs.
Awesome. With Lindani having been murdered by the police, do you think that there's anything different in how the violence, the delay of justice?
It makes you feel like you're not safe, I guess. Like the ones who are supposed to protect him and you actually took away my protector, and there's no justice so far. And it's been 2 years. None. And the cops got away with criminal charges before even all the evidence came out. So I think it's possible in 10 years' time, or maybe at an FBI level, something will come together. But it's really disheartening. I don't know. It being a violent murder, I didn't know people could get away with things like that. Like, I kind of always believed you grow up believing cops are there to protect you. And even though I knew about George Floyd and I did know those things happen, I didn't think it was going to happen to me. I mean, he was singing change is going to come. I have a video of him singing that in a Black Lives Matter t-shirt the week before at the same side street, on the same, a couple blocks away. Now he's a name on the Black Lives Matter shirt. How stupid is that?
Lindsay, what surprised you about grief?
I think for me, the first cut is the deepest. Like, since losing Lindani, I've lost so many people close to me and close to him. I'm not coming home to the same family I left. And I'm also here and losing much of his family. So the first cut is the deepest. Everything after that, it's not the same. It doesn't hurt as bad, I want to say, which sounds awful to say, but it's true. It's like the first time you lose someone close to you, your whole world shakes. And for me, I just had a very innocent mindset of like, this is the world and it's such a good, happy place. And it's like, yes, but there's also a lot of evil and a lot of darkness. And to have someone hurt someone close to you and know that you can't do anything to save them, but they've already been murdered. I was so surprised how much I learned about how much he was grieving his mom. Now that I know what grief looks like, I can see all the times when he was grieving mama. And I would even, at first I used to keep saying, I used to keep saying, are you okay? One day he was like, stop asking me that. And now I get it. I'm like, that's the worst question because it's such a loaded question. It's as if you're saying, you're supposed to be okay. We're all okay. Are you okay? No, because no one wants to, one, address that they're not okay and vocalize that when you're in pain. Sometimes you're in pain, you don't want to describe the pain you're in or you don't want to talk about it. And two, there's this assumption by people in society, if they don't know better, if they've not grieved, there's an assumption that you're supposed to be okay. And you're not. That's a very unrealistic expectation. So when people kept asking when I came to our home in South Africa, they kept saying, how are you? How are you? And I'm like, doing as good as possible. I just kept saying as good as possible because I'm not going to say I'm good. That's a fat lie. And the response in isiZulu, you say unjani, you say ngiyaphila. You say, how are you? You say, I'm alive. You're actually answering, I'm alive. Or what you actually need to say if you're with your kids and you're with family, you need to say, we are alive. And we came home and everyone wanted me to say siyaphila, we are alive. And I'm like, we're not alive. Literally, man down. We got 3 left out of 4. And people keep pushing me, say siyaphila. I'm like, I'm not siyanapila. Okay. So for me, it's like those days I could see him grieving his mom. He would lay on the floor in the kitchen where the sun is, and then in Denver he would lay on the floor on the porch where the sun is and just lay in the sun and close his eyes sometimes when he was resting. And I used to say, "Are you on the floor?" And in other moments, like we're in the car, I'd be like, "Are you on the floor?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm on the floor," just to say I'm grieving without having to say I'm grieving. And my code word was meow. Was so symbolic of him grieving. And I didn't know that at the time. I just knew he was in a bad mood or something. That is totally me now. When I'm having a grief day, I don't want to talk to anybody. You can give me a hug. You can buy me chocolate. You can surprise me with something cool I didn't know existed on Earth. Some craftivity, something creative, a new song.
I'm happy for you that you guys were spiritual and so you're able to grieve him in a spiritual way. Because when people don't feel connected to the person who's died, then it becomes a regret thing. Oh, I never sensed your pain. But because you have an ongoing relationship, he continues to teach you.
That's actually true. That is so true.
So I know that as far as coping mechanisms go, your strong support network, do you have a lesson there around what they did that other people can glean when they are dealing with someone who is grieving?
My emergency support system was through the roof. It was amazing. I had 7 people fly into Hawaii, 3 or 5, or I don't remember how many, fly with me to South Africa from Hawaii. So that's major. With that said, after the emergency was over, I had one friend stay with me, Shrina, for 6 months. So yeah, I guess helping people grieve, it's hard because I think the onus really is on the griever to start to learn to communicate what they are feeling, and then on the supporting party to say, I'm here for you, I love you. And just, I guess on any day you can say, I'm here for you, or you can actually show up and be there for them. or show up and bring them food or something. I don't know, just acts of service, acts of love, whatever their love language is, gifts, words of affirmation, physical touch. Hugging someone means a lot to some people. So if you know your person, then just to start to study them and learn them. And especially if you have a grieving spouse, I know a lot of people who their husbands have lost their moms, and I can see the husband is grieving and the wife just says, but why is he acting like this? And why is he doing this? He doesn't even know he's grieving. He hasn't even been equipped to express his emotions his entire life. And now he's supposed to deal with massive death of the one who brought him into this world, and his whole world's unstable. How can you be a support person for him? Don't judge him. Don't judge his decisions. Don't judge his actions. I mean, yeah, have your own healthy life and boundaries and everything, but just give someone space to grieve. Give them space to not be okay. Don't assume they're supposed to be okay. Don't rush their timeline, and to just ask people honest questions like, how are you doing in your grief process? You know, if you're close to them and they trust you and you've learned them as a person, you should be able to start talking about those things like, how are you doing? How are you taking this? What can I do to help? You know, and call on birthdays, call on anniversaries if you can.
I agree that knowing who we're supporting is helpful, because you can't say, do this for the person. Some people are not touch people. So I think it's a great guide for people to look further into how to support. If you really, really want to be supportive, you can learn more. I think we could all be more grief informed, and which is part of the reason I'm doing this. You've been so articulate and you've really covered a lot of issues. Anything of Lindani's that you hold dear and you continue to use, or is there anything like that for you?
Well, I'm super sentimental, so I kept everything of his. I still have it all in a closet, and I also believe in not rushing yourself for that thing. When it comes to other things, the worst thing is if you get rid of everything in the beginning because people told you to, and then you've got nothing, or everyone said, I want his sneakers, I want his this. In my head, this is his stuff. My wedding ring is Nandi's, his shoes are in Sizwa's, and that's about it. But also when it's time to get rid of stuff, or take, like when I felt it was time to take off the wedding ring, you'll feel a clear message of when your timeline is. I think for each person, they get their own message. And I like to wear, if I'm having a really down day and I really feel close to him or very far from him, I'll wear one of his t-shirts to bed, and it just makes me feel better.
I like when you say clear message. Lindsay, as we wrap up this very intense conversation, do you want to talk about the major way that you feel grief has changed you?
I think I was more sensitive before, and I cared more about what people thought of me. Now I don't care what anyone thinks of me. There's just no point. We can't go anywhere with that, because I realize when you die, you literally, you know, this thing of you don't take things with you. It's true. It's like you kind of just leave people with however you made them feel, and then whatever worldly possessions you're leaving behind. And it's funny how we so majorly grieve the people who taught us something in life, and the people who showed us love and kindness without conditions, and how easier it is to grieve people who are just so mean to you. So I think it's just showed me not that life is about running around and just making memories. That's good too, but also being honest with each other and trying to help each other make each other's lives better. And I feel like Lindani had reparented me. I mean, my dad was a great parent in all the ways he could for us, but Lindani had a mom and a sister, and I had a dad and a brother. So he taught me how to sweep. He taught me how to cook. He taught me how to do things I didn't really properly know how to do. So all that reparenting kind of added up to, like, now I'm a better person. I can pass the torch on to someone else. Now it's my turn to be a protector and provider like he was. And he also taught me nurturing from his moms that I can pass on to my kids. So I just feel like the wheel goes around, and his mom is just like Nandi, and he's just like Nsizwa. So around we go. I'm still on a journey with my two, and I've got half of him in Nsizwa, half of him in Nandi. So I feel like I kind of have 100% of him.
I am so glad that you shared him with us. It is clear that God made no mistake by drawing you guys towards each other. I don't want us to end without me saying that this is heavy. I commend you for working on this, Lindsay. I commend you for putting one foot after the other every day. I commend you for the big things. I commend you for the small things. And I wish you well on this journey, the physical journey of the trials and all, as well as the emotional journey that you're on.
Thank you.
And you know what, Lindsay? I hope that lightning will strike twice because you are love and you deserve love.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time on this episode of Granules of Grief with Refiloe. I do hope that you got even just a granule of what you need. You can find more information on the podcast on my social media profiles on Instagram at Refiloe and Refiloe on my Facebook page, as outlined in the description box. I hope to see you there too.
Difficult journey, the physical journey of the trials and all that, as well as the emotional journey that you're on.
Thank you.
And you know what, Lindsay? I hope that lightning will strike twice because you are love and you deserve love.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time on this episode of Granules of Grief with Refiloe. I do hope that you got even just a granule of what you need. You can find more information on the podcast on my social media profiles on Instagram at Refiloe and Refiloe on my Facebook page, as outlined in the description box. I hope to see you there too.